Hi everybody, this is Diane. I am so excited to get to show you this journal. This is the journal that I thought about not doing because the cover was not in great shape. And I had a lot of Christmas journals to make, and so I thought maybe I wouldn't do this one. I am so glad I did because I think this one might be my favorite of all the Christmas ones that I've done so far this year. So I can't wait to show it to you. It's done with a 1930, I'll tell you the date for sure, but it's 1930 something book of A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. And it measured 7 1/4 by 9 and almost 9 1/2. So it's not a little one. The spine is 2 1/2 inches. So you can see the gold embossed detailing around. And then I rubbed some gold paint around the edges also and added these book corners. This bottom edge of the book cover was quite frayed, so I covered it with some plaid fabric and then added this trim to it. And I just decorated with some vintage crochet, vintage lace, a vintage button, and this charming little chipboard angel ornament. I put this khaki colored ticking fabric on the spine and some more vintage lace, and I made bead dangles. I bought the one-step looper that Kate Thames showed me. Remember, there's a video of the things that Kate brought me after we had our face-to-face meeting at Tioga Downs, where I go to the flea market. And she showed me, she's heard me say on my videos that I don't really like to make bead dangles, and so she showed me this one-step looper, and I ordered it from Amazon, and I used it to make some of these. And I even put on some jingle bells. There's 2 bells on there. So I am so happy to have that looper. I think I'm going to actually enjoy making beads. On the back, I used a stencil and the same gold paint that I put around the edge, and I just put some gold paint on there. I like the way that turned out. And then I put some gold rickrack on the front and the back. There was a mark right here, and I don't usually mind marks on vintage books, but I didn't like that mark for whatever reason. It stood out too much and it was ugly, so you can't even see it was there now. That's why I did the stenciling on the back. That's enough of the outside. Let's go in. The end papers were beautifully illustrated, and I left them as is. I just added this little book plate from Roxy Creations, so you can write your name on there, and I added some red rickrack, and that's vintage rickrack. Some of the items that you will see in this book I have done on video, so you may have already seen. Some of them I did off camera, so some of it will be new for you. There are 3 signatures. On the front of each signature, I put a pocket. This is from a scrap of scrapbook paper, cardstock. And this is from a piece of vintage, or not vintage, but it is wrapping paper. And it's I don't know if they're reproductions or if they were created for this wrapping paper, but they look like vintage ads from a Christmas time newspaper. So this ad is for Christmas toys. The subscriber is now manufacturing sugar toys of every description, which he will dispose of wholesale and retail on the most reasonable terms. Country merchants are invited to give him a call. And then I added this little piece of lace and some gold rickrack, and this is an alterations tag with a Mod Podged napkin of Santa Claus on it. Some trim on the edge. And there's a teddy bear on a rocking horse there, blowing a bugle. So those are some Christmas toys. I just used a sponge to add some color to this page. Here's one of the illustrations from the book. There's Scrooge with the Ghost of Christmas Present. So you get some of the text of the book too, or you could add some pictures on top. This is computer stationery. And the digital papers that I used in this book are from Antique Papery. I will leave the link below for that. Really pretty collage type of digitals. I did some stenciling. Here we have note paper that you can journal on. And this is a scrap of a vintage tablecloth. There's a velvety ribbon up here and gold rickrack. Some more stenciling. And here's a page from a book about the Saturday Evening Post Christmas edition. So this is a illustration by Norman Rockwell. And he did a lot of illustrations that look like they would fit in with this era of Dickens. And it doesn't say on this side, it says on this side, 1938. There was a little splotch on this page, and so I did a little collage, scrap of paper, some foil, and this little printable ticket. Oh, this is a digital from Tsunami Rose. Some more stenciling, and then this is a quote from John Greenleaf Whittier, and it's a stamp that I have. For somehow, not only at Christmas, but all the long year through, the joy that you give to others is the joy that comes back to you. And I thought that was very appropriate for the Christmas Carol story. A plaid scrapbook paper, some mulberry paper, and then his quote from the book. And it was always said of him that he knew how to keep Christmas well, if any man alive possessed the knowledge. May that be truly said of us and all of us. And so, as Tiny Tim observed, God bless us, everyone. And there's a piece of paper here that I turned into a Rita Donnelly flip. You can flip it up and write on it, and then include something in the pocket. This is a vintage Christmas seal. There's a recipe in here for macaroon creams. And then this is just a scrap from a book that I had about keeping records of all of your Christmases. So there's room for journaling there, and this is just a little tidbit about Old English Christmas. Something fun to read. There is a vintage paper coaster and a vintage gift tag as a tuck spot. This is cut out from a vintage Christmas card, as is the back part that it's glued to, and they left the little quote on it: "The charm of Christmas lies in the thought that we live in the memory of our friends." And there's a little bit of glitter on that. Here's some music paper for Good King Wenceslas, and I thought that was appropriate for the time period. Vintage gift tag, and I just used some punch outs and a few other things to create a little embellishment, which I then turned into a tuck spot. And this is a vintage calling card with Christmas greetings and the season's best wishes. It's embossed, and it's genuine vintage. The Antique Papery paper with some stamping. This is a pocket, an envelope that I made. Actually, it's an envelope, a large envelope that I collaged on. I didn't make the envelope, I just decorated it. And it is sewn into the middle of the signature, and I am going to glue it closed. And then I did videos of collaging these envelopes. And included in the pocket, in the envelope, is this card, which I made from a Tim Holtz cardstock piece with a lot of Christmas words on it. This is from a 1986 appointment book, and it's a December page. And this is cut from a vintage Christmas card. And this is a vintage Christmas card. Each of these envelopes has one of these cards and one of these. I won't put that in till the glue dries, but you can see the collaging that I did. And this is a really old piece of music that had this really old brown cello tape on it. And I left it on there because it's really cool. This was just a little collage of fabric and lace. And I tucked this little printable tag up in there. There's a stamp of a Christmas tree here and some stenciling. Vintage lace, a poinsettia hang tag from a florist. This is just a note paper with some coffee dyed paper glued to the back. And this is from Mrs. Coggs, An Old-Fashioned Family Christmas. And I'll link her below also because I used several of these pieces in this journal. There's one of the fly leaves of the book, the original book. So I stenciled on all of the white sides of pages. Here's just a little flip with some vintage rickrack and vintage lace and a vintage piece of a tablecloth. And I decorated this guest check with vintage sequins and a vintage gift tag. This is not vintage, and neither is the guest check. Isn't that antique papery paper so pretty? This is a belly band that I made last year. I had 2 of them left. This is a piece of ribbon that I had gotten at a yard sale, and I sewed it to some red cardstock. It's a lady with a muff. And these are this is from Mrs. Coggs. I'm not sure about this one. This one is either Tsunami Rose or Mrs. Coggs. Another illustration from the book, Scrooge with the Ghost of Christmas Future. And this is from Mrs. Coggs, Christmas Words and Phrases. This is a little illustration from a little book, little Christmas book that I used the cover from it to make a little Christmas notebook. And I used several of the illustrations in this book. Just add a little lace there and a Mrs. Coggs illustration here. Second signature, again, we have a pocket on the front with a piece of that wrapping paper with a Thomas Nast Santa Claus illustration. And a gift tag that I made with some Tim Holtz stamps and a plaid paper. Again, I used sponges on this one and a stamp. A flip. This one was pieced. It's a piece of patchwork that I got at a flea market, but it's not vintage, I don't believe. But this tablecloth is. This is a little square cut from a vintage tablecloth, and this gold trim is vintage. And I stamped some snowflakes on this. I said I stenciled on all the pages, but I didn't on all of them. I did some stamping, and then I inked around the edges of some of them. Here is another quote from the book. I cut it right from the text block. Scrooge was better than his word. He did it all, and infinitely more. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. He became as good a friend, as good a master, and as good a man as the good old city knew. I think I read that quote in the last video that I did because I was gluing it on. This is a recipe card that was double sized, so I just folded it over. You can write here, and you can write here. There's another guest check that I decorated that you can write on, and a little fun Santa Claus playing card. The holly and the ivy here. I never did find the correct tool for putting this eyelet on. I got it on, but it's not really the way it should be, but it's secure. That's a vintage gift tag. And I just put a tiny little pocket there. If you watched the previous video, you'll know why. And this is another little vintage sort of card from Raphael Tuck and Sons. It says a Merry Christmas. And another Santa playing card. This is a story about Here We Come a Wassailing. This is Tsunami Rose from her Christmas list paper. Another Norman Rockwell illustration from the Saturday Evening Post, and I like to think that this is Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig from the story, A Christmas Carol. There's a coaster and a gift tag that I used as a tuck spot, and there's another Christmas recipe for grandmother's eggnog. And a vintage postcard. Isn't that gorgeous? Another envelope, and I will come back and glue that shut. There's a piece of old cellophane there again. This one has a little piece of vintage lace right there and a little printable tag. And on the back there's a printable from Tsunami Rose. Piece of lace right there. Again, this is from a vintage Christmas card. Illustration from the book. A cluster, fabric cluster, that this piece is from a vintage tablecloth. Notepad you can write on. Another poinsettia hang tag, a vintage Christmas card. And this is probably from Mrs. Cox. Some more snowflakes stamped on that page. You can write over them. They're stamped light enough that you can write right over the snowflakes. Another piece of the tablecloth, lace, and rickrack. There's a teddy bear in a stocking stamped on that page. And a Mrs. Cogs word quote, the Christmas tree, and another illustration from that little book with some bits of vintage lace and crochet. Tsunami Rose printable. And the third signature, again, has a pocket with two pieces from the wrapping paper. A little bit of trim here and some lace. Mod Podge napkin onto a tag. I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all year. That came from the Mrs. Cogs Christmas words and quotes. There's Bob Cratchit and Tiny Tim. Another fabric flip. Just a little collage here for fun. This is a little bit of wrapping paper there. Red doily and a piece of foil, gold foil. And this is Scrooge with the Ghost of Christmas Past. Again, a little flip up that you can write on. A piece of vintage trim, crochet, a vintage Christmas seal, and this little card that I cut down, and it has the Mother Goose rhyme, Christmas is coming, the geese are getting fat. And there's journaling on the back. This, I made a little tiny pocket out of this vintage gift tag and some punch outs, a little snowflake shaped sequin. This is cut from a vintage Christmas card, and someone had cut it out and glued it to another piece of a vintage Christmas card, and another of the little foiled ornaments, like this. This came off. I'm going to have to put it back on. I have to make sure I close that tighter. And another patchwork envelope. This is cut from a vintage card. And a flip. You can write on this and then also write on that. This is a printable, but I don't remember where I got it from. I'm thinking it might have been a free one from somebody, but I don't remember. Here's another quote from Charles Dickens. I don't think this is from this book, though. The year-end brings no greater pleasure than the opportunity to express your season's greetings and good wishes. May your holiday be filled with joy. And this looks like Bob Cratchit in his home with his family, probably with Scrooge looking in the window with the ghost of Christmas present. There's the other belly band with that ribbon, and this pretty little girl from Tsunami Rose with a plum pudding in her hands. A fabric flip. This is a bit of a vintage napkin. I had used other parts of the napkin to make a pocket on a previous Christmas journal. I love this stencil here. And there's Mr. and Mrs. Fezziwig dancing at the Christmas party. It says Merry. This is from the old design shop. And another illustration from the little book. A Merry Christmas to everybody. A Happy New Year to all the world. Hello there. Whoop. Hello. That was at the end of the book when Scrooge was all happy. And there we have it. A really fun, large journal. And it does have a hitch fastener. It's kind of, it pops off when you squeeze the book, but if you add more photos and stuff, it will stretch it out and make it tight. So I will reattach this and close that gap better, and this will be ready to go in my shop. So unless someone reserves it between now and when this video goes up, it will be in my shop when you see this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye.